So, I just got back from Louder Than Life. Louder Than Life, a glorious 4-day weekend in sunny Louisville, Kentucky, where me and my friends got to run around festival grounds with expensive food, sweaty crowds, and airplanes flying overhead, all while listening to some great live music last month. While there were some albums I wanted to review that came out last month, a lot of my time listening to music in September was spent on preparing myself for all the bands that I wanted to see this year. And between festival burnout, being smuggled out of the state of Kentucky, and me catching a mean case of COVID, there definitely wasn't a way I could pay attention to anything new. So today, instead of the usual format, I'll be looking at an album from a band that I saw each day at LTL and telling you guys how their live performances were. So let's do it! Let's kick things off with an album that was actually in my honorable mentions at the end of last episode, which was Movement's third album, RUCKUS. I had known about this band before with their biggest hit, Daylily, but I never checked out any of their albums until this one. I have to say that it might be my favorite out of all of their releases. Lead single Killing Time has a groovy bass line and an almost arpeggiator-sounding guitar line, courtesy of bass guitarist Austin Cressy and Ira George on lead guitar, with lead singer Pat Miranda talking about how he realizes he's in a toxic relationship, but feels attachment to this person regardless of that. Heaven Sent, one of my favorites on this album, features airy synths along with the guitars taking a more vibey direction, all with absolutely blissful lyrics about Patrick and how much he loves his significant other. Of course, I have to shout out all of the lyrics as a whole, because they can feel gut-wrenching at times with Miranda's excellent delivery. Fail You details him dreaming about him failing his significant other, but he wakes up with those thoughts still on his mind, as his partner sleeps peacefully next to him. And Dance with Death details the anxious thoughts he has while driving around a ridge with his friends. And of course, the instrumentals are great throughout the album too, with the previously mentioned tracks having a lumbering and driving feeling and a fast pace respectively, thanks to drummer Spencer York and the relation to the lyrics of each track. Talking about their live performance, the energy was infectious, and I was right on the rail to experience it all. Also, I ended up grabbing a guitar pick from their show, which was really awesome. Some highlights from this show were I Hope You Choke from this album, and especially Daylily from their first album. If you're looking for an album that has very relatable lyrics and amazing instrumentals that feel like they're all intertwined together, RUCKUS is one you should listen to. Next up is post-hardcore band Dance Gavin Dance and their 10th album, Jackpot Juicer. If you know anything about this band and the sound that they've been refining since their 5th album, you'll know what to expect from this release. The first track, Cream of the Crop, feels like an emotional powder keg when the intro, Untitled 2, ends as clean vocalist Tillian Pearson asks multiple different questions that seem to relate to the band and brings back the strings from Untitled 2 for the bridge. Of course, unclean vocalist John Mess gets some great and hilarious lyrics throughout, like on Pop Off with his classic nonsense relating to the theme of a toxic partner in a relationship, and Long Nights in Jail having him tell 2 people to get out of his house as he's the wrong person they're looking for. Now, while this is their longest album to date, the guys bring plenty of interesting ideas throughout its hour runtime, which include the addition of rhythm guitarist and second clean vocalist Andrew Wells, who also appeared on their past 2 albums. I really enjoy his addition, as his voice adds a lower range that I really missed from their first 4 albums. For the Jeers is another good track that features all 3 vocalists, with lyrics about self-doubt and a great instrumental that's driving, groovy, and laid back, all at the same time. I think my favorite instrumental might have to be Two Secret Weapons, which has a moment where the track glitches out like a record skipping before jumping back into a fast break, courtesy of the previously mentioned Andrew Wells, drummer Matt Mingus, lead guitarist Will Swan, and the late and great Tim Vierick on bass. Of course, Tillian gives an interesting story about an older woman that's trying to stay beautiful and seek validation through her looks, as John screams more nonsense with references to other tracks in the band's catalog in the outro of the song. Their live performance was also really fun too. Compared to past tours, this time they had screens that displayed imagery with spotlights of one of their characters, Gavin the Bull, on the front of them, and a banner of their current album cover, which is something they've done since I've been following them at least. Highlights from this show include Synergy from this album and Chucky vs. the Giant Tortoise off their album Mothership. If you want to look at what the band is in their most recent incarnation, this is one to check out. So, funny thing about this album, this one wasn't on my radar at all, but was actually recommended to me by my friend Chris. So, thanks, man. With this being the first Avenged Sevenfold album that I've listened to from front to back, it definitely wasn't what I expected. This album features a more progressive sound compared to the few tracks that I've heard from them, and it's definitely interesting. Lead single Nobody has almost robotic hi-hats start the track as the rest of the instruments feel like they're lumbering around. Cosmic, one of my favorites off this album, features spacey cymbal patterns and keys that help drive home the lyrical theme of the cosmic bindings that we have to the people we love in multiple lifetimes. But to me, I think the main attraction of this album is the God trilogy that's featured at the end of the album, which showcases some of the interesting lyrical content of the album that includes themes of existentialism, the purpose and value of our existence, and the anxiety of death. G focuses on God regretting his decision to create the universe, the nature of some religious people, and the concept of God himself. Ordinary has a robot that wants to learn how to feel and be human, but would need someone to artificially create these emotions for them. And Death has a person who thinks life is nothing more than a dream. Of course, the instrumentals were probably the best on this album, with G reminding me a lot of Thank You Scientist, and the chorus sounding very similar to Livin' in the USA by the Steve Miller Band. The other instrumentals on the trilogy are great too, with Ordinary having glossy and robotic synths, and Death having an orchestra that gradually builds with the increasingly morbid lyrics. And of course, lead singer M. Shadows manipulates his voice to fit the characters that we hear on these tracks. I'd also like to shout out the instrumental title track as well, which serves as a nice closer to both the trilogy and the album as a whole, and could be considered a continuation of the previous song, Death. For their live show, I wasn't able to get good footage of their set as my phone had died, but the visuals were great, and it made me come around to some of the tracks on this album. Also, shout out to M. Shadows for stopping the show a few times throughout to make sure everyone was okay. There were a few crowds at the main stages all weekend that were getting pretty crazy, so it was nice to actually see a band stop things and make sure people were getting help if they needed it. Some standouts at this show were We Love You from this album and A Little Piece of Heaven from their self-titled album. I won't recommend this as the first Avenged Sevenfold thing you should listen to, but as them taking an interesting direction into prog rock, I do recommend this one. Finally, let's take a look at hardcore band Turnstile and their biggest album, Glow On. This one has banger after banger on it, with opener Mystery starting the album off with an airy arpeggiated synth that explodes into pure hardcore punk bliss. But don't think you're in for something standard, because this album does a lot of interesting things in the instrumentals. Don't Play features an instrumental with a samba-like beat underneath, courtesy of drummer Daniel Fang, and Wild World has tempo blocks that appear at the start of the track and show up throughout. The lyrics are also fun too, and have some substance with them as well. My favorite deep cut, Dance Off, has lead singer Brendan Yates talking about the music scene he was a part of and the scene he's now cultivating through the band, with an almost pep rally feel to the instrumental. New Heart Design talks about trying to figure out who you are as a person with a more glossy sound in the guitars that keeps the energy up. But let's be honest, you'll probably be shouting every catchy hook that comes out of Yates' hardcore yell rather than analyzing the lyrics like on Holiday and Endless, another favorite of mine. And of course, their live show was just as energetic. With the barrier having been moved for some additional set pieces for Green Day, Brendan got pretty close to the audience, and bass guitarist Franz Leons had a lot of interaction with the audience too. The pits were really fun to jump into, and there weren't a bunch of crowd surfers coming overhead to leave me unfocused on the music. Some standout tracks live were Blackout and show closer TLC, both featured on this album. If you're looking for a gateway into the hardcore genre, this is definitely the album you should listen to. And that's all for this episode. If you want to stay up to date on all things HTV, consider subscribing and ringing the notification bell for more content here at Henderson Television. Also, follow us on Instagram at henderson.television for updates on future releases, and check out the brand new Reddie Reviews playlist to listen to all the tracks that I've mentioned in this and previous episodes. Tune in next month for more recent, personal favorites, and local music. I've been JT Dickens, and until next time, listen loud. Welcome back to the honorable mentions part of the video where the credits roll beside me and I list off some albums that I did not get to review this month. So, here we go. Olivia Rodrigo, Guts, Doja Cat, Scarlet, Dryer Fire, Punk's Dead, You're Next. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to Henderson Television.